Hey folks, I wanted to do a video talking about Brotato because I've been playing it a lot recently. I've just completed level 5 on all of the characters and just talking to some of my friends, and they thought it'd be a good idea maybe to throw up a video similar to my Slay the Spire videos if you've seen that, because I actually think there's a lot of comparisons here between Brotato and Slay the Spire. One thing I kind of found when I was starting to play Brotato, and this is again like Slay the Spire, I was being presented with these choices to make, leveling up and getting items from the shops, and I didn't really understand what was good and what was bad. And I found I didn't actually have fun with Brotato until I did understand that, and I found then I was making interesting choices. The choices before then didn't really feel that interesting to me. And another issue I found is when I went looking for help with Brotato, I found the guides were really segmented off, and there's a load of good guides out there, but they're for the individual Brotatos. Is that what you call them? Brotatos, potatoes. So like, this is how you play the farmer. This is how you play the hunter. But I didn't find a good video that kind of taught me how to play Brotato rather than just like following a guide for each individual class. So this is what this video is attempting to do. The idea is when you finish watching this video, you will have a better understanding when you get shop choices, when you get level up choices, you'll have a better understanding of which one you should be picking. And hopefully you'll have a better understanding of the interesting choices you'll need to make as you play through a run of Brotato. So I think I only have like 4 slides here. I didn't put loads of effort into slides. These are more just to have up on the screen to remind me of what I want to talk about and to give you a visual, I guess. But you can kind of just like second screen this, put it on headphones, and go about while I'm talking crap. So I wanted to start off, what I've done is I've kind of separated into 2 segments here. I have the general statements segment, and then I'm talking about the checklists and the buckets. So you might remember from my Slay the Spire video, I kept talking about like checklists and buckets in terms of, you have to answer a bunch of problems that the game gives you, and if you check off all of those things, you will complete a successful run. So if you remember in Slay the Spire, it's like, do I have enough early damage? Do I have enough card draw? Do I have enough sustain mitigation? In Brotato, it's very much the same. I think it's a bit simpler, and I've narrowed it down to 3 essentially buckets, and that is offense, defense, and economy. But within those, there are also the balances you have to maintain across. So I'm going to talk about that after this slide. But I thought it'd be good to start off with like general statements that kind of are true no matter what you're doing in Brotato. So first off, this is kind of what I was talking about in the intro. Your macro is more important than your micro. You might think when you look at this game or you first start that this is a micro intensive game. It kind of looks like a bullet hell game, looks like one of those action dodgy type games. And while micro is important, to me, the macro, so that is understanding what you want to do in your run from 1 to 20, what your character needs, what shop items are best, when to re-roll, what leveling items are best, etc. That is way more important than your micro. That macro gives you the ceiling. Your micro pushes up against the ceiling a little bit and makes the difference in the margins. I'm not saying micro isn't important at all, it is, but if you have the best micro in the world, you're still going to be capped by your decision making. However, if you make all of the correct decisions, unless you get like a very unlucky run, you can be a crap micro player and still finish this game no problem. So that is important to state, and this is why I think this guide and guides like this telling you how to understand the stats are really important, because they'll improve your macro hopefully, which will improve your success in the game. The second one is learning the individual is important, but overall knowledge is key. Again, kind of what I was talking about in the intro. The Slay the Spire videos were nice for me to do because I could just pick up the Ironclad and then just talk about that character in a very holistic fashion. That's not as true in Brotato because there will be characters that do very specific things and need you to build in a very specific way. But I do think that if you have the overall knowledge of stats and what they do and how good they are and how to balance them and how to prioritize them, you'll be able to look at a character who looks a bit weird and understand why they look weird and what you need to do in the run to like solve them. So for example, after this video, hopefully you'll know how important something like attack speed is compared to dodge or something like that. And then you'll come up and you'll see a character that has minus 50% attack speed, plus 50% dodge. I'm just making stuff up, but you know what I mean. And then you'll be able to go into that character and think, okay, well, I have no attack speed. What does that mean for my build? So I think overall knowledge is key. But I would recommend, if you're still struggling, there are lots of good guides out there for very specific characters. But I think the beauty of Brotato is not just following a build, and I'll reference that in point number 5. So number 3, my favorite, buckets, checklists. This is what I was talking about in the Slay the Spire videos. Balance in the majority of cases is going to, across the stats, is going to be how you win your Brotato runs. Balance not only between offense, defense, and economy, but balance in the stats, the offense stats and the defense stats, making sure that your armor and your health and your sustain and your mitigation are all nicely balanced together. It is worth pointing out that in Brotato, you can just fill one bucket so full. This is a stupid analogy, that it will carry you to win a game. So and there are characters that kind of position that as well. You might have characters that shed your defense but give you massive buffs to offense, and the way you play that character is you just offense your way through the levels, and you have so much damage that you don't really need to deal with mitigation at all. Vice versa, you might have some characters have an amazing economy but don't have great defense and offense, and your economy is the thing that carries you through. But it's worth noting that if you're trying to build in that way, you have to put way more into that specific stat than you would if you were balancing between the 3. And it is generally easier, it is definitely easier to balance between the 3 than it is to stack one stat. So balance across your stats, very important. We're going to go through that as we talk through the 3 different stats, categories, I guess. The number 4, 1 stat back, 5 stats forward. You'll notice when you start buying stuff in the shop, the way a lot of items are worded is they'll take something away from you and then give you a benefit. There's 2 things to note here. The first thing is the items will always give you more than they're taking away, even though the numbers might not correlate to that. It looks like it might be taking away more. The thing that it's giving you generally is way better. And then you also get stats in different ways. So you get max HP when you level up. You get stats. You get to pick a stat when you level up. Your item sets will give you stats. So in Brotato, you're always going to have way more stats than what is being taken away from you. And this is kind of then how we go back to point number 3 there and talking about balance, right? So you have to be able to understand that if I take away this stat and I'm gaining this stat, what does that do for my overall balance? Maybe I had a lot of the stat that I was taking away, so that's fine to take away. One more thing that I'll say about this, because I think it's a bit of a trap that people fall into, is they'll learn a little bit about Brotato, and they'll learn what are really good stats, right? So they'll watch a guide and they'll be like, SMGs are really, really good. SMGs love range damage. I'm going to build SMGs. Oh no, this item is taking away a little bit of range damage to give me X, Y, and Z. Sometimes it's okay to take away a very important stat for you because you've identified that the thing that you're getting is even more important and you're getting more of it. And then you have to be able to remember that, note that down, and go, I need to kind of then balance up the other way in a few levels time. And because you're always moving up, the stats are always going up, that little balance will always make your character stronger. So, and then there are certain stats that you can identify that you can tank early on. Not tank, but take away early on, that you need to get back later. So speed is a really good example of that. You can drop your speed a little bit at the start because it's not as important, but then as you get towards the later levels, it becomes more important. So you just need to remember, I need to pay that back essentially. And then the last one here is be careful about doing a build. So this is what, kind of going back to what I said in point 2, a lot of the guides out there, when you try to learn how to play Brotato, they'll be telling you how to play a very specific character, and they'll give you a build, and they'll be like, this item is best, these are the stats you're looking for, these are the items that you're looking for as you play through the game, and you'll be playing and you'll just get runs where the game is not giving you that build. And this is, if you've played Slay the Spire and you've come away from my videos or anybody's videos, you should know that you cannot get sucked into what you think is the correct build, right? You have to work with what the game is giving you. And if you have a greater understanding of the stats and how to balance across them, you'll be able to move away from these specific builds and then just take the items as they come, and try and think towards stat balance than build, okay? You don't need a build, you do need stat balances. Okay, so that's my general statements about Brotato. Let's get into the actual buckets themselves. First one is offense. The first thing I guess to note is these 3 stats blend into each other as well, right? I mean, offense, obviously very important in killing things, but it's also a defensive tool because the quicker you kill things, the less you're going to have to take. And it's also an economy tool because the quicker you kill things, the more enemies you kill on a map, the more materials you're taking in. So sometimes don't always get sucked into thinking, the offense defense is a really good analogy here, right? So sometimes you might think, I'm taking way too much damage. Why am I taking so much damage? My defensive tools are actually pretty strong. And the actual answer is, well, you're not killing things fast enough, right? So it doesn't matter how defensive you are. You just are not clearing the map quickly enough. You're taking too many hits. So you need to look into offense, or vice versa. I'm not killing things fast enough. I'm taking too much damage. Well, it's because your defensive stats aren't good enough. Your offense stats is fine. And the aim of this video then afterwards, when I go through the 3 sides, is you should have a good idea. And this is absolutely crucial in Brotato. You should have a good idea of when you're okay in a certain area and when you need to go on to another area to prioritize. I'll say this now because I don't. This will come up in a few different stats, and I can just refer to what I just said now. Opportunity cost in these types of games, including Slay the Spire and absolutely in Brotato, opportunity cost is something you always have to be thinking about because you're always going to be given treats. Okay, you're getting nice little treats every time you play a level. You're getting stat boosts. You're getting items. So it's always going up and up and up. But you have to think of the things that you're not getting. And this is probably even more important in Brotato than it is in Slay the Spire. Because in Slay the Spire, you get a shop. The shop is the shop, right? You get your 3 cards when you clear a hallway. Your 3 cards are your 3 cards. But Brotato has a reroll button. And that reroll button is so important, right? So you might find that we'll just give you an analogy of like defense, right? You're taking loads of health, for example. You're taking max health, and every time that comes up, the game is just giving you lots of max health items, right? And you might have like something crazy like 150 HP, right? And you might still find that you're finding the game really hard, right? And it's because you haven't identified when to stop taking max HP and start like aggressively looking for the other things that you're falling down on. Maybe you have loads of defensive stats, you keep clicking armor. It's going to go the other way, let's be honest, right? If you're new to this game, you're going to be taking loads of offense. Every time you see percentage damage or melee range damage, you're going to be clicking that button. Oh shit, that's a purple item. Like curse, I'm not getting monetized anyway. You click that purple item because it's nice and shiny, it looks really cool. But you're clearing the map every time. You've no problem in offense, but every time you take a hit, you're losing a ton of HP, right? And then you get to a level where your offense isn't going to carry you through, and you die, and you go, "This game is too hard. I just can't micro my way out of this. I can't move fast enough." And that's not the issue. The issue is you kept piling stuff into offense, and you haven't balanced your stats. You're not thinking about the opportunity cost. So that is absolute. That is, if you're going to take one thing away from this video, that is the key message. You have to balance between your stats, unless you're going crazy. But I'm not going to focus on that. That's just the niche cases. Unless you're going crazy in one side and it just carries you through. But that does not tend to happen unless you're playing very specific characters or you just got really lucky in shops and runs. Generally, you have to balance across, and you have to understand when to stop in a stat and move on to something else. And I'm going to try and give you some numbers to try and actually be able to identify this number is okay. But also it's a feel thing, right? You just have to feel it out. Okay, so let's talk about offense. Melee and range damage kind of go hand in hand here. Melee obviously is the stat for when you're holding a melee weapon. Range is the stat for when you're holding a ranged weapon. This is a flat damage increase and is massively tied to what weapon you're going to have. Okay, there's different weapons in the game. Some of them will come with a really fast attack speed, but they'll have low damage, and then vice versa. Something will attack very slowly and have very high base damage. Okay, when we're thinking about now balancing stuff across and opportunity cost, the melee and range damage are really important when you get to a nice level of base damage. Okay, so the comparison, I guess the analogy here to use would be the SMGs, right? The SMG is a ranged weapon. It attacks very fast, but it does very low damage. Range damage is really important for the SMG because it has low flat damage. So every point of flat damage that you bring up does a ton to it. But then if you look at most melee weapons, for example, Most melee weapons will have very high base damage, like the stick, for example. The stick is a perfect example because that even gives you more damage the more you have of them. Melee damage doesn't really do much for the stick, right? Because it's already doing quite a lot of like straightforward damage, but it attacks very slowly. So now attack speed becomes really important for the stick, but not as important for the SMG. Range damage very important for the SMG, melee damage not so important for the stick. And that's why I know I told you I'd give you numbers, but like those numbers are going to look a bit weird, right? Because a nice range damage, in my opinion, for the SMG is somewhere around like, I'm very happy with like 20, but I'll settle for like 15. 12 to 15 I'll be okay with. Get up to 20, I'm very, very happy. The stick, I don't know, like 5. 5. The stick is already hitting for a ton of damage as soon as you get one, and then the more you get, the more damage you're doing. What I care more about the stick is attack speed and how fast I'm hitting, because I'm already using that high base damage. So we've talked about melee damage, range damage, and attack speed. I want to now bring in percentage damage and crit chance into this, because all of these things are balanced together, right? The percentage damage is the multiplicative modifier on top of your base damage. Okay, so again, you probably, now that I'm saying this to you, you're probably very clear. There's no point having high percentage damage when you're doing low base damage, right? So then vice versa. If you have a nice high base damage, there's no point stacking more base damage onto it. You want to multiply it, right? You want to get that multiplicative factor. So again, if we're taking the SMG, just because it's the weapon that loads of people use, you get to 20 range damage, right? You're doing a nice, strong base hit, and your attack speed is pretty good because the SMGs comes with a very good attack speed. Now you want to start looking at percentage damage, because that's going to multiply all of your base damage up, and you have your attack speed already sorted. So now you're going to be hitting very hard, very quickly. And then we look at crit chance, right? So say you have like an extra 40% extra damage on top of your nice 15 to 20 range damage, okay? Now you want to start looking about, what could crit chance do for me? If I had an option between, so say I already have 40% extra damage on top of a nice base damage, do I want an extra 15% damage? Or do I want an extra like 5% crit or 10% crit? I'm probably going to move on to the crit chance, right? All of these things work together to build it up, right? And then finally you add in range and elemental damage. We'll go with range here. Range is kind of an odd stat in terms of like, it's one of those stats, and there's a few of these like these in Brotato where I just want to keep it at a nice level. Okay, it is something that you can absolutely tank a bit to get more important stats, because I would say it is one of the lesser important stats, but you will feel a low range. And so you need to kind of make sure you're not feeling that. If you're using ranged weapons that like bounce their projectiles or have projectiles that pierce through enemies, range becomes a little bit more important. So you have to think about that a bit more. If you're using something, wild like a sniper rifle that bases a lot of its damage on range, then range becomes hugely important, but that's a niche enough case. Similarly, when you're in melee, you're already needing to get in pretty close to hurt an enemy. But you do feel the difference between a standard needing to get up close or a melee weapon that's on a character with very low range. Then you need to get too close, right? And so it's a balancing act. So like, I will happily tank my range. I'll play a game depending what I'm using now. But say if I'm using a melee weapon, I'll have like minus 40 range and I'll be okay. But also, I'm not going to say no to like the plus 20 range, plus 30 range. It will fill. You will feel it. It's nice to have, but again, it's that opportunity cost, right? If I have those lens or whatever they're called, the glasses that give me plus 20 range, and I'm comparing that to a defensive stat when I'm feeling I don't have enough defense, I'm taking the defense every time, right? Or even like, say we have that example where I have a nice flat damage, but now I need to move that flat damage into percentage damage multipliers. I'm probably going to take the percentage damage multipliers over range. The only time I'd really take range is when I know I need to fix my range because I've taken items that's tanked it. Okay, so now we're on to elemental damage. Elemental damage is kind of worded like it should be a primary damage stat, right? So melee damage, range damage, engineering, and elemental damage. I kind of feel like the developers kind of felt that they were supposed to be all of the same power. But I don't feel that usually elemental damage is something that you can hang your hat on. To me, elemental damage is a supplementary stat, right? It's if I have elemental stuff going on, I'll start buffing my elemental damage. Or if I'm in an engineering build, we'll talk about that in a second, might start looking at my elemental damage. I would rarely go into a game where I'm going to pick the torch, and then I'm going to move, or the taser, and then I'm going to move into a flamethrower, and I'm going to buff my elemental damage. It doesn't tend to work like that. It's more something I kind of fall into. And I'm willing to admit that might be something like an internal bias as a player or something like that. But it's just, I never found that as reliable as melee damage, range damage, or engineering, which I'll talk about now in a second. But yeah, I mean, you fall into it. You might get some items that do rely on elemental damage, and all of a sudden that becomes more important to you. Like scared sausage, for example, is a kind of maybe a key item that might start to turn you towards elemental damage. But for me, I'm usually being carried by my melee or range stuff or my engineering, and then I can tag on elemental damage to increase my damage. Say if I'm just not, if I'm not there with my primary damage, elemental damage could be a good way to supplement that. But I do think that's kind of like a more, like, this is supposed to be a learning the stats kind of guide, and this is something that you kind of only pick up after you've been playing Brotato for quite a while. That way to pivot, as the shops aren't working in your favor, you can pivot. And to me, elemental damage is very much a pivot stat. And then finally, engineering. So I left engineering to last because it's a really weird stat, and it's one of my earliest learnings, I guess, trying to really learn Brotato and complete all of like the level 5 characters. Is engineering, I thought, was really weak at the start because it just didn't hang with melee and range in terms of pure raw damage, and I still think it doesn't. But engineering is like the opportunity cost stat for me, right? If you pick engineering, you start buffing up your turrets and your structures and all these little things, right? They only really care about engineering and then the side items that you pick up. So like piercing bullets, for example, explosion size, stuff like that, right? They don't care about your melee damage. They don't care about your range damage. They don't care about your attack speed. They don't care about your percentage damage. They don't care about your crit chance. That's 5 stats. And if the offense, if you manage to get into a run where your offense is good enough to just rely on engineering, all of a sudden there are 5 stats here on range. They don't care about range either. 6 stats that you can just ignore, you can forget about. And if you're forgetting about all those things, think of all of the other stats that you now could be taking, okay? So for me, the way my engineering runs tend to go is I'll get engineering, I'll start getting structures together, I'll keep plugging away. Every time I see an engineering stat, I'll take it. To me, when you're in that mode, there is no limit for engineering. Just build it and build it and build it. But then I'll be way more able to look into my economy because I'm not worried about melee and range damage and percentage damage. I'll be able to pick way more into defensive stats. I'll be able to re-roll more in the shops, looking for the specific things I need to get through the run. And that's where I think engineering sits. It's very different in offense to the other things. And like my typical engineering builds won't kill any of the bosses usually. And they'll win the 20th level by just running away from the bosses, and I'll be fine because I'll have so much mitigation, I'll have so much speed, my structures will be slowing down the bosses, I'll be healed by the turrets, I'll have loads of consumable healing and whatever, that I'm just not worried about the bosses. They're not going to touch me. And I'm scooting around the map and I just wait until the timer runs out, and all of a sudden I've won an engineering run on level 5. So that's where engineering sits for me. Really nice. If you haven't used engineering much, I'd highly recommend it. It's just a really nice way to pivot into like other stats and buff them right up. So that's offense. Hopefully that gives you an idea of kind of when you're looking at these stats, how to blend them all together. Okay, defense. So the stats around defense: max HP, HP regeneration, lifesteal, armor, dodge, and speed. There's a few of these that kind of go together, which is quite nice. Okay, so the first thing we'll talk about is max HP. Max HP is just really nice, right? I mean, if you've played any game, any RPG ever, any of these games, you'll know more health is just always really useful. It is not going to be, you can't rely on it entirely. It's not like a mitigation thing, and there is a cap. Not a cap, but like it starts to get less effective the more you get. Do you know what I mean? Because you should be supplementing your mitigation with other things. But it's just really nice. I'll always take more max HP. I'm always comfortable at around, now listen, it depends on what's going on in the run, but usually I'll aim for like 80 to 100 max HP. Anything under that, unless there's something specific going on, I feel like I'm like 2 or 3 hits away, especially on level 5. You're not that many hits away from dying. Anything over that tends to be just overkill. I'd rather reroll for other like balancing defensive stats. There's not much to say about max HP. It's really good. I would try and get it early enough just to get out of that, like, 10 to 20 range. I try to hit like 30 HP around wave like 8 and then move into like 40, 50, 60 as we go through the teens. You start hitting your bosses at like 11 on. So like by the time I hit a boss, I want to be at least 40, unless there's something weird going on in my build. I want to be at least 40, maybe more. And 40 is good. 40 is good. So yeah, that gives you an idea about max HP. HP, regeneration, lifesteal, and other forms of healing all combined together. In Brotato, unless you're doing something really weird, you want HP. I won't say HP regeneration because that kind of, you want ways to gain back HP. Okay, no amount of micro is going to stop you from taking hits, and you are not going to get the mitigation until like the very late levels where like HP regeneration doesn't matter, or gaining HP doesn't matter. The other forms of healing we'll start with first. Okay, the consumable healing. There's a bunch of items, weird food, lemonade, that buff the healing you get from the items that drop on the ground. And you can get more items to drop on the ground by getting luck. That is a really, really good way of healing that I think a lot of people don't consider, right? They drop on the ground, you can leave them for when you need them, and they're immediate. They're very quick, especially if you buff them a lot, in a way that HP regen and lifesteal are not. They can be until they're buffed like into crazy levels. They're not like an instant boom of health. And in the way Brotato works is you will take, especially on level 5, you'll take big chunks of damage. You'll be on 100 health. You might get run into by a boss and you'll be down to like 60 health. One more boss, you're right down again. So you're on 30 or something like that. And then you have to like slowly get it back up by lifesteal or HP or regen or whatever. Or you could just run into a bunch of consumables that have fallen on the ground from the trees and the enemies, and you're back up to like 80 health, and it's really nice. Okay. Consumable healing, I just want to point that out straight away, is very nice. Then there are other forms of healing as well. There's a ton of them. I can't go into all of them now. There's turrets that will heal you. There's the monkey guy who you'll get healing on material gain. There's one when you get healing when you dodge. Another one where you get healing where you crit chance. All of these are good. I'm going to talk about HP regeneration and lifesteal in a second, but the message I want you to take away from this is you need healing, and you can't just fully rely on HP regen or lifesteal as your only way of getting back healing. Okay, you should be looking at the items that you get that buff healings in other way as important ways to get the healing. And then don't be stupid about it, right? Don't take the item that heals you on a dodge when you 0 dodge, or the item that heals you on a crit when you 0 hit, right? Think about your build and how you're doing it, but definitely you do need like that sort of supplementary healing. And then there's the primary healing, which is HP regen and the lifesteal. The way I tend to think about these is they're an either or for me. Okay, I don't like to try and buff both of them up, because I like them to have nice robust numbers. And if I keep on picking them both to try and get them both up, we're back to the opportunity cost question here, and I don't think it's necessary. I split them very, very cleanly. For me, I will pick lifesteal when I have a fast attacking weapon. It doesn't matter the damage, because that's not how lifesteal works in this game. It's just a percentage chance to get you, I think, a single health point back. Okay, that's all it is. It does not care about the damage you do. So you could have a gun that shoots very fast and it only does 1 damage, and it'll be as strong as a gun that shoots very fast and does 100 damage. It'll be the same. That's lifesteal. On HP regen, then I'll take it on the other end when I do not have something that attacks very fast. So that'll be on a melee character that maybe hits very slowly. It'll be on a engineer who doesn't hit at all, really. HP regen, really, really good there. One thing to point out is the flamethrower that you get, say if you are doing an elemental run, does count as like, when you hit them, it does count as hitting them very rapidly. Okay, so that works really well with lifesteal. In terms of raw numbers, lifesteal I tend to be comfortable when I get to like 15 to 20. That's a nice number. I will get more if needed, but like that, again, opportunity cost, right? You hit 15 lifesteal, and then what you really want to be looking for is consumable healing, or the items that heal you in other ways. HP regen will go a bit higher. I like if I'm fully going into HP regen, 30 to 40 is an all right number for me. But like, that's a number you can go to the moon with and really feel. Like, if you play some characters that have really high HP regeneration and you are just unkillable. It's really, really nice. So yeah, that's the important thing to take away from like gaining health back. Take one or the other: lifesteal for fast weapons, HP regeneration for slow weapons or no weapons, and then supplement it with the other forms of healing. Really, really important. Okay, armor and dodge we'll talk about next. Armor is a flat increase. It'll always, I should have had the numbers beside me, but I think it mitigates like 6% damage every time, 6 point something. But it'll always do the same for every point of armor. Okay, dodge is a percentage chance to dodge all of the damage. So the way that plays out is every point of armor that you get is really, really impactful. You will really notice a difference between 0 and like say 5 armor, whereas you will not notice the difference between 0 and 5% dodge. Obviously, dodge goes the other way. Then dodge is really, really strong the more of it you get, and it's capped at 60. But like, if you're going, and I would say, like, don't think of I'm going to do an armor run this turn, I'm going to do a dodge. Try and get them both. A perfect run for me will be, I'll have armor at like 10, and I'll try and get as close to the dodge cap as I can. But like, once you're past 40, you're in a good place, and try and get to that 60. Start prioritizing dodge the more of it you have. You do not need both of these to be really high for a successful run. Like, you don't always need 10 armor, 60 dodge, right? That is, that's the dream. But it does help, right? You do need to pay attention to armor. Try get it to at least 5 if you can, and then try and get your dodge up. But like, don't be there on level 18 with 5% dodge and go, oh no, I need to get it to 60. At that point, you're not getting it to 60. You're probably not getting it even to 30. You're not getting it to 20, let's be honest. So just at that point, you're going into armor, you're going into max HP, you're going into HP regen or whatever, and then you're going into offense, right? This is, again, calling back to that time where these things need to blend together. So that's armor and dodge. I think that's a pretty simple kind of way to think about it. And then finally, speed. Speed is kind of like range, but more important, right? So the first thing to think about with speed is you need generally, okay, again, we're talking about general characters who don't have crazy high damage or crazy high mitigation. Generally, first things first, you need more speed. You need enough speed so that if you're running in a straight line and an enemy is running in a straight line behind you, you're going to be faster than the enemy. And I think for all enemies, except for that ribcage enemy that gets faster and faster, you start meeting them on like turn 12, I think, on level 12. He gets faster and faster the longer he stays on the map. Apart from that character, 0 speed to like 5 speed is enough to do that, I think. Maybe some bosses might be different, but in general, I found that you get to like 5 speed, you're fine. The next thing to think about speed is it's also it's obviously a defensive stat, but it's also an economy stat, right? The more speed you have, the more you can get around the map, the more you can collect the materials, the more you can find trees to knock down. So also think of it as an economy stat. The other thing is you can tank your speed in the early game fairly safely, but you need to then start thinking about getting it back by the time you start meeting the bosses, which is from 11 onwards, okay? The normal speed to keep ahead of enemies is nice, but then the more speed you have, and this is probably the best way to think about it, the more speed you have, the more you're allowing your micro to get you through levels. Okay, the more speed you have, the better chance you have of dodging bullets, the better chance you have of dodging like enemy charges at you, and also a lot of time the better chance you have of, you might notice your patterns when there's a lot of enemies on the map. and you don't have enough damage to like just clear them. You'll kind of skirt around a bit, and then there might be a little gap in the middle that allows you to kind of run through and maybe collect all the materials that you kind of left there. The more speed you have, the easier it is to do that. For me, there'll be a point in the run, probably around the time I start meeting the bosses, so 11 to 15, where I'll start thinking about how good is this run going for me right now? Am I just clearing the map all of the time? Or am I just a tank? I'm not scared of anything. If those things are true, I don't really care about speed. All right, I'll keep speed at a medium, nice little level, 0 to 5 or 10 or whatever, and I'll ignore it. If I'm thinking, actually no, this is a bit tough, this is a bit like I'm starting to find some levels a bit tricky, I'll start to vastly prioritize speed. And I'll get to like 20, 25, maybe even 30. You don't want to get loads of speed, right? That's probably as much as you want. Because when you get to that point, that opens up the map and opens up the opportunities for you to micro your way out of like kind of tricky situations. So that's kind of how I'll think about speed. I will tend to tank it at the start to get some items together, because I really, the way I kind of look at potatoes, I want damage in initially. Then I want economy and damage is a better way of saying it. I want harvesting, I want luck. We'll talk about that in a second. And I also want damage to start clearing the map. And then, because the first few levels are easy, you don't really need to care about mitigation too much, defense rather, too much in the first few levels. Then as we move to like levels 11, 12, 13, probably even before that, I'll start to think about like, how am I going to survive these tougher levels? And speed becomes a part of that calculation. Okay, that is defense. And finally, economy. It's probably an obvious thing to say, but like none of the previous stuff happens if you don't have a good enough economy. So economy is materials gained and XP gained, right? These are the things that allow you to power up your character, and you obviously have to power up your character if you're going to complete all 20 levels. So we'll start with... I want to start with harvesting. I know Luck is here first, but I'll just kind of talk about harvesting first. The way harvesting works is you will get the number of materials and XP based on the number of harvesting. And then after that ticks at the end of the level. After that ticks, it'll raise by 5%, just on itself. So what that means is the more harvesting you have, the more that 5% is going to grow, essentially, right? Because, as it goes back to what I literally just said, because the first few levels are easy enough, they're not really asking you many questions, they're not posing you many challenges. That is a great time to start getting harvesting. Not only because you have more levels for it to actually, do its thing, you have 20 levels for it to tick through, and the opportunity lost of scaling your damage or your mitigation is way less relevant in levels like 1 to 6 than it would be if you start tanking your defense and your offense in like level 11 or something like that, So for me, I'll look at harvesting and I'll be like, I'm massively, unless I'm playing a weird character, I'll massively prioritize this in the first like 1 to 6 levels. And then I will kind of judge how things are going. If my runs are going pretty smooth, if the levels are going pretty smooth, I'll keep taking harvesting until like, I don't know, level 12, 13 even, depending on what I'm getting. If I'm finding it's not going that well, then I'll just be like, okay, well, I have a nice little harvesting pile that I started in level 1 to level 3 or 4. I'll now just kind of pick the stuff that I really need. So that's how you think about harvesting. Luck is a little bit different. So luck is also that type of stat where the earlier you get it, the better, because it has more chances to do things. So luck does a few things, right? Luck will generally increase the quality of items you get in the shop, and it will increase the chance of enemies dropping the consumables to heal and crates, which give you items essentially. The one thing to say about luck in terms of the item quality thing, to me, that's actually the least important part of luck, even though it's the flashiest thing, because the normal quality items are really strong, right? They're excellent. You might notice here, I've put a bunch of items because economy, the only primary stats is luck and harvesting. So I've put a bunch of items where I also think it matters. All of these, I'm pretty sure, are basic items. All right, they're really strong. So what I want to say is, like, there are some game changing items at the higher levels for sure, but you can absolutely win runs just getting good basic items. What luck is way more important for me for doing is dropping the consumables. And dropping crates are nice, but absolutely consumables. You remember what I said about healing? Consumable healing is an amazing form of healing. And if you have a ton of luck and you have a map with, like, 7 or 8 consumables scattered around it, if you are in massive trouble, running through those consumables is going to give you a ton of time to stay alive. So really, really good. I'll tend to look at luck the same way I kind of do as harvesting. I'll pick it up at the start, happily enough, and then as same kind of idea, right? How is the run going? Can I afford to spend more in luck without spending stuff in offense and mitigation? If so, I'll do it. The only difference is, while harvesting for me, there's a kind of a cutoff point at like level around 11, and also around like how much you get. Like, to me, if I have like 100 harvesting, I don't want any more, right? That's enough. But luck, because it increases the chance of dropping consumables, you can also look at luck as a mitigation, as a defense stat. And if I'm finding that, like, I don't have enough life gain, or I don't have enough HP regen, but I have a lot of healing consumables, all of a sudden luck is a primary defense stat for me now, and I'm going to get more of it. So yeah, that's the way to look at luck. I'll again, luck is a weird one. I'll be very happy with like 50, very happy with 100. It kind of just depends, really. Okay, so then there's the 4 other parts of the economy are not primary stats. You can't just pick them in a stat up, but they are. And there's lots of stats like that I haven't included in these slides, like explosive damage and piercing, all of which are very important, but they're not as important to the economy slide here as these 4 things, and I just wanted to kind of bring them into economy. Also because, the primary stats are just luck and harvesting for economy, but that's not the full side of the picture. Okay, so the first one is XP gain. I put the picture of the scar there because that's the common XP gain. To me, XP gain is fine. I will pick it up towards the start of runs, maybe, but like I'm not too bothered by it that much. It is nice to have for sure, and like the primary stats that you get on a stat up can be way better than items. Like, you might get really lucky and roll into a plus 12% damage or a plus 8 max HP. You won't find many items that will give you that. And so getting the XP gain in nice and early, especially if you have a nice luck bonus as well, is very nice. That's just one I wanted to throw in there because it's a nice to have, but not hugely important for me. Shop buffs, incredible. Shop buffs are absolutely brilliant. The coupon is really, really nice. I'll pick the coupon all the way up to like level 11 or 12. It discounts the cost from the shop, essentially. If you get this early, so nice. It can stack. Obviously buffs to your shop. There's another one there that gives you a free reroll. Very nice as well. Your shop is incredibly important when it comes to getting through the levels in Brotato. The items that you pick up from the shop are going to be defining. And so any way to buff that shop is really nice. I will pick a coupon pretty much anytime I see it. I'll pick the elephant free roll most of the time. Not always, but most of the time. So really, really nice. The next thing is material buffs. Material buffs are incredible. So there's a whole range of items here, but essentially this category is an item that makes you get more materials in a level. Okay, so I've put the gentle alien here beside it because I want to make a specific point about the gentle alien. It gives you damage and max HP, and it looks like the trade-off is more enemies. But the more enemies is almost the best part of Gentle Alien, because more enemies means more materials. Okay, so really, really nice. Anytime you see those items, I think there's only 2. I think there's only the Gentle Alien and then the mouse that gives you the 10% lifesteal and 10% enemies and I can't remember the lifesteal, but you pick them up every time. Every time. If you feel that like your build is not good enough to deal with the Gentle Alien, the problem is with your build. I shouldn't say build. I keep telling myself not to say build. The problem is with your run, right? How the game is going. It's not with Gentle Alien. This is an incredible item. There's other ones like the bag, which is incredible. You want to pick the bag up as soon as you see it every time. It means that you get 15 materials every time you pick up a crate. Again, stacks with luck really nicely, but it's brilliant. Material buffs, I can't say enough good things about them. You want every single one of them that you find. The more materials you get, the more stuff you're doing in the shops. And then finally, trees. So we're kind of just talking about two things here. We're talking about the trees item, which means more trees will spawn, and then also the lumberjack shirt. Trees are incredible. This won't be a surprise after this talk, which has gone on. How long is this talk? 45 minutes? Okay, under an hour. I love consumable healing. I love crates. I love luck. All of these things get way better the more trees you have. This item is amazing. The lumberjack shirt I also want to call out as a very good item to pick up. I will almost always pick this up. Number one, because you kind of underestimate how many hits it takes to knock a tree down. Even if it's like 3 or 4 hits, it's 3 or 4 hits that should be going in the other direction to enemies, right? One hit is so much nicer. And then that gets even more important when you have like a low attack speed type of run. Get the lumberjack shirt. Really, really nice. And also the second reason is it's one of those items, and there's a few of these in the game, where you only see one in your item pool, and when you buy it, you'll never see it again. So you're essentially like, tightening up your item pool. You're making it so you see more items that you actually want. But yeah, I would say pick up the lumberjack shirt. Economy is an incredibly important part of Brotato. You want a strong economy. It will buff up your offense. It will buff up your defense. But I just want to make the point here: it's not just about luck and harvesting. In fact, I would say it's the other stuff is probably more important, like trees and material buffs and probably shop buffs are probably almost more important than harvesting and luck. But harvesting and luck are very good. You should not ignore them. They are, for me, like, especially at the start of the game, the most important stat you can pick up. There'll be some runs where I'll finish level 1 and I'll get like +1 melee damage, +3 health, 5% dodge and whatever, and no harvesting. And I will re-roll to try and find the harvesting or the luck. That's how important it is. So that's my Brotato guide on the stats. I hope you found that helpful. If you've any questions, just leave a comment on the video. If you have any disagreements, sure, leave a comment on the video. And thanks so much for watching, folks. And don't know when I'll do another one of these, but I hope you enjoyed it. Bye bye.